Welcome to Thoughts on Ministry podcast with Ray Eppard, a podcast focused on helping you be more effective as you serve God. Now, here's your host, Ray Eppard.
Well, hello. I'm glad you could join us today. This is my Thoughts on Ministry. I'm Ray Eppard, and we've been talking about the different positions in leadership, and right now we're kind of dealing with knowing and functioning where you are. There's 5 levels of leadership. There's positional, relational, productional, developmental, and institutional. And many of the mistakes that ministers make is in not either knowing where they are or not functioning where they are. So often people just try to deal with, well, the truth, bless God, and that's the way it is. Well, I like a statement that John Maxwell makes. He said, if you think you're a leader, but there's no one following you, then you're just out for a walk. And at that point, the reason God put us into positions of leadership is to actually have a positive effect on people's lives. And if the primary effect that we're having, now obviously everybody's going to have situations that don't work out, but is it a track record of things not working out? Or is it a track record of people being developed and helped? Which one is it? But one of the biggest things that affect people in that is not knowing where they are and not functioning there. And because of that, they just, well, bless God, I'm going to lay the truth there, and that is what it is. And they just got to deal with it. Well, that's not actually what Jesus did. A lot of people talk about, well, we ought to do what Jesus did. Well, the best way to find out what Jesus would do, what would Jesus do, is to find out what he did do. And with that, he always dealt with people on an individual basis. He dealt with them with where they were. Now, from that standpoint, we're not talking about what many would call situational ethics. Truth doesn't change, but how you apply it at the moment, that application is different. It's like dealing with a 2-year-old or a 20-year-old. You might be dealing with the same concepts with them, but you don't present it the same way to a 2-year-old that you do to a 20-year-old. You don't have the same expectation of a 20-year-old that you have of a 2-year-old. You expect more out of that 20-year-old than you do the 2-year-old. We have to understand where people are. And you see, the problem is when we think that Christianity is just purely a religion, and therefore, all your ducks have just got to be in the row, and you need to conform. Christianity is a relationship. Relationships aren't about conforming. Relationships are about growing. And so often ministers bypass that relationship aspect and really try to function in a way as though they were an institutional person who has sown into these people's lives, who they are in a position with them that people can take hard truths from them. You see, Jesus, who had a very deep relationship with the Apostle Peter, when Peter said some things to him about, oh no, he wasn't going to have to die on the cross and so forth, Jesus looked at him and said, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Well, that's a pretty strong thing. You don't need to be doing that with everybody that disagrees with you. That would be a wrong way to function. But Jesus knew where he was. Jesus knew he was the one that actually said to Peter, "Flesh and blood hasn't revealed this to you, but my Father which is in heaven." And so there was a deep relationship there. The rich young ruler that came to Jesus who said, "I've kept all the commandments. What else do I need to do?" At this point, it was a personal thing about his own particular calling, but Jesus spoke to him and said, "Go sell all that you have." And that was a very strong requirement in that relationship. But on the other hand, Jesus dealing with the woman that was caught in adultery, he said to her, he said, "I don't condemn you." And actually, he helped get her out of being stoned, which was something that the law actually required. He helped get her out of that. But then he told her, he said, I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more. He didn't say, shucks, don't worry about it. Don't sin anymore. He didn't change what it was, but he reached out to her different because she was in a different position than the rich young ruler was, than where Peter was. You see, we've got to know and function where we are. That's actually what Jesus did in his ministry. Well, that's my thoughts on ministry. Join us again next time.
You've been listening to Thoughts on Ministry with Ray Eppard. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.